Imagine this. A dim room flickers with ghostly light. Shadows tremble against a wall. A small crowd gasps. Because for the first time in human history, pictures are moving, not paintings, not puppets. Light itself has come alive. But here's the question that keeps historians awake at night. Who truly made the first movie? Some say it was Thomas Edison, the wizard of invention. Others whisper about the Lumière brothers in France. Yet, deeper in history, before any of them touched a camera, someone else had already dreamed of light that could tell stories. Tonight, as the world drifts into slumber, we will travel back through time, into the sleepy corridors of invention, shadow, and wonder, to discover who truly brought dreams to life on the silver screen. Gentle music fades, the story begins. Soft music, a slow heartbeat of time. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the world before electricity, before cameras, before screens. The only light came from the moon, candles and fire, and in that flicker of warmth and shadow, the first dream of cinema was born. Long before stories were written, humans drew them. Inside the cool darkness of ancient caves, in places like Lascaux, France, and Bimbetka, India, artists painted scenes of animals, hunts, and rituals. But if you look closely, something magical appears. A single basin drawn with 6 legs, a horse with its head in 3 positions, a hunter mid, spear throw frozen in multiple moments. It wasn't clumsiness, it was motion, attempted movement. When firelight danced on those uneven walls, the shadows shifted, and the figures seemed to come alive. People would sit quietly and watch the animals leap, flicker, and breathe in the glow of the flames. It was not film, but it was illusion. And illusion is the mother of cinema. From that moment, humans were entranced by moving light. The idea that pictures could move, that light itself could tell stories, became a silent obsession. Over centuries, as civilizations rose and fell, this dream traveled through cultures like a sleepy whisper. The Greeks built shadow theaters. In ancient China, storytellers used silk screens and candlelight to cast silhouettes that danced in rhythm to their words. And somewhere in Persia, wandering magicians began to carry glass, boxes filled with smoke and flame, showing visions that moved like spirits. Each of these, the shadow play, the lantern show, the smoky illusion, was another step towards cinema's birth. But the magic lantern, that was where the real magic began. The year was around 1659. And in the quiet chambers of a Dutch scientist named Christian Huygens, something extraordinary happened. He had been studying light, bending it through lenses, splitting it through glass. And one night, he painted an image on a tiny piece of glass, placed it in front of a light source, and projected it onto the wall. It wasn't clear. It wasn't sharp. But when the glowing image appeared, it moved gently with the flicker of the flame, like a ghost breathing. Huygens had invented the magic lantern, the ancestor of every cinema projector that would ever exist. Soon, lanterns spread across Europe. In grand halls and cobblestone courtyards, traveling showmen called lanternists entertained crowds. They projected devils, skeletons, angels, and faraway lands. Children gasped. Adults whispered. Some believed the images were spirits trapped in glass. A showman would whisper, "Close your eyes, and when you open them, you will see the souls of the departed." And then, the wall would come alive with dancing ghosts. People screamed, laughed, and cried. Cinema was still 2 centuries away, but its spell had already begun. As time passed, the magic lantern evolved. Inventors improved the lenses, made the light brighter, and began painting multiple slides to create transitions. With clever tricks, fading one image into another, they could simulate movement. A ship at sea, a moon rising over the mountains, a lover waving goodbye as a train departs. These illusions felt alive. Artists began calling these shows phantasmagorious, the assemblies of ghosts. They were often performed in dark rooms, with eerie music, smoke, and whispers. In 1798, a Belgian illusionist named Ian Gaspard Robertson took the magic lantern to new heights. He created an entire theater of fear in Paris, projecting enormous skeletons and phantoms that moved across walls and ceilings. His audiences screamed in delight and horror. Robertson had unknowingly created something cinema would inherit forever: the ability to make people feel through light. By the early 1800s, the world was full of motionless images yearning to move. Paintings showed emotion. Photographs captured reality. But nothing yet moved. That changed with a small, mysterious toy: the thaumatrope, a disc with 2 drawings, one on each side. When you spun it quickly, the images merged. A bird appeared inside a cage. It was simple, but enchanting, a small piece of motion magic. Then came the phenakistoscope in 1832, a spinning disc with drawings arranged in a circle. When viewed through slits while it spun, the drawings appeared to move, running, jumping, flying. It was the first time people saw motion captured by design, not by accident. Soon after came the zoetrope, a drum with pictures inside. When spun, the figures seemed to dance endlessly in a loop. Children in Victorian homes would stare for hours, hypnotized by the illusion. Light, shadow, and patience were weaving together, forming the silent language of motion pictures. The dream was growing stronger. By the mid-1800s, several minds began chasing the same dream. Who would be the first to make pictures truly move? Not in toys or lanterns, but in real life, frame by frame. In 1878, a man named Edward Muybridge changed history. He was hired by a wealthy horse owner who asked, "Do all 4 of a horse's hooves ever leave the ground at once when it runs?" To answer, Muybridge lined up 12 cameras along a racetrack triggered by tripwires. When the horse galloped past, the cameras clicked in sequence. Snap, 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 freezing motion in 12 stills. When he replayed them quickly, the horse seemed to run again. For the first time, motion was captured mechanically, not imagined. Muybridge didn't know it, but he had just invented the principle of frame-by-frame animation, the heartbeat of cinema itself. Soon, Inventors around the world began experimenting. The French scientist Etienne Jules Mary built a camera that could take 12 pictures per second on one strip of film, calling it the chronophotographic gun. It looked like a weapon, but it shot time itself. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in America, a man named Thomas Edison was building something new: the kinetoscope, a machine where a person could look through a peephole and see moving pictures inside. But Edison wasn't alone. In France, two brothers, Auguste and Louis Lumière, dreamed not of machines for one person, but of theaters filled with people watching together. They wanted cinema to be shared, not a private novelty, but a public dream. The stage was set. The flicker of the lantern was about to become the light of the projector. And soon, the world would see something it had never seen before: life captured in motion. Soft instrumental music rises and fades. In the next chapter, whispers the narrator, we will step into the dawn of cinema, where the Lumière brothers and Thomas Edison battled quietly to define what a movie truly is. Soft piano fades in, the sound of an old film reel beginning to turn, before the silver screen ever screamed with light, before a single audience sat in the glow of projection. The world had already fallen in love with shadows, because shadows, in their quiet mystery, were the first storytellers of night. It began in silence, as most beautiful things do. The 17th and 18th centuries were full of flicker candlelight, oil lamps, and fire. Each tiny flame became a stage, each wall a canvas. In the deep, echoing streets of Paris and London, traveling magicians arrived with peculiar boxes made of wood and brass. They were heavy, covered in soot, and smelled faintly of oil and glass. Inside them, a secret slept: a lantern that could make pictures move. The audience gathered in dim halls, breathing in anticipation. The showman whispered, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, you will see what no eyes have seen before. Pictures that live, spirits that dance. The room darkened, the wick was lit, and suddenly, through a haze of smoke, a skeleton emerged on the wall. Its jaw clattered, its arms waved. It was both terrifying and magnificent. Gasps filled the room. Someone screamed. Someone else laughed in disbelief. For the first time, a wall had become a window into another world. The magic lantern's beauty was in its simplicity. A lens, a small hand, painted glass slide, and a bright light source. First candles, later oil lamps, then limelight. Each slide carried a story. Perhaps a soldier marching, a ghost rising, a lover waving farewell. The lanternist would swap slides quickly, or overlay them for effect. He could even make the images dissolve into one another. A moon turning into a skull, a flower blooming into a face. Those early experiments were the grandparents of every fade, dissolve, and transition in film editing today. Cinema's grammar, the way it speaks through images, was being written by men carrying lanterns through the fog. Not all lanternists were showmen. Some were philosophers. A few were priests using the lantern to teach parables. Others were scientists, using it to explain astronomy, geography, or anatomy. And then there were the dreamers, artists who saw the lantern not as a tool, but as a brush of light. In Germany, showmen projected swirling clouds and angels across cathedral ceilings, making people feel as though heaven itself was breathing. In England, children watched fairy tales unfold on nursery walls. Cinderella in shadow, Jack climbing his luminous beanstalk. And in France, a new kind of performer appeared, part magician, part storyteller, who began to mix science with wonder. That was where Gaspard Robertson entered the story. Robertson was not a scientist by training. He was, as he called himself, a phantasmist. In 1798, he opened a show in an abandoned Paris monastery. The sign outside read, "Phantasmagoria, the spectacle of ghosts." Inside, the audience sat on creaky wooden benches, surrounded by smoke and mirrors. Robertson dimmed the lamps, whispered incantations, and began projecting ghosts. Enormous, glowing specters that glided across walls and ceilings. Some images appeared to move closer, others shrank and fled. He achieved this by moving the lantern itself back and forth on wheels, creating the illusion of motion and depth. The first zoom effect in history. The people screamed, crossed themselves, and swore they had seen the souls of the dead. It was terror. It was theater. And it was, in every way, cinema. Before cinema had a name. For nearly 200 years, the magic lantern held its quiet power. From royal courts to village fairs, from science halls to children's nurseries, its light glowed softly across generations. But time, as always, wanted more. In the early 1800s, new inventions began to stir. Machines that didn't just project still slides, but could create movement. Enter the zoetrope, praxinoscope, and phenakistoscope, strange spinning devices that used persistence of vision, a quirk of human sight. When images were flashed quickly one after another, the eye didn't see them separately. It saw motion. A bird flapped. A man jumped. A woman smiled, and the human heart quickened at the illusion of life. It was, perhaps, the moment when people realized that motion could be recorded, replayed, relived. That realization changed everything. The 19th century was a century of machines, steam engines, telegraphs, typewriters, and soon cameras. Inventors everywhere were trying to capture the impossible time itself. Some believed that if they could record motion, they could preserve truth. Others thought they might even capture the soul. In England, a man named William George Horner created the zoetrope in 1834, a drum that spun on a stick, with drawings of dancers or horses inside. Children could peer through narrow slits and see the figures twirl endlessly. In France, Charles Mile Raynaud invented the praxinoscope, replacing the slits with mirrors for a clearer view, and eventually building a version that could project his animations onto a wall. In 1892, he presented the world's first projected cartoon, Pantomimes Lumineuses. People laughed and clapped, unaware that they were witnessing history's final rehearsal before cinema took the stage. While Europe played with lanterns and spinning drums, across the Atlantic, a new kind of dreamer was at work. Thomas Alva Edison. Edison was not a magician. He was a machine maker, practical, relentless, and endlessly curious. He had already electrified the world with the phonograph and the light bulb. Now, he turned his gaze toward motion. In 1888, inspired by Muybridge's photographs, Edison began designing a machine that could do for images what the phonograph had done for sound: capture and replay them. He called it the kinetoscope. It was a tall wooden cabinet with a peephole. Inside, a continuous loop of film passed rapidly before a light, creating the illusion of motion. One person at a time could watch a short clip: a dancer, a kiss, a blacksmith at work. For Edison, it was business. For the public, it was wonder. Yet something was missing. The kinetoscope was private, a solitary experience. Cinema, as it was meant to be, had not yet woken from its dream. Far away in Lyon, France, two quiet brothers were preparing to change everything. Their names were Auguste and Louis Lumière. They grew up in a family of photographers and inventors, surrounded by chemicals, lenses, and paper. Their father, Antoine, owned a small photographic business. But he was more than a businessman. He was a dreamer, much like his sons. One evening in 1894, Antoine returned from Paris, excited after seeing Edison's kinetoscope. He told his sons, "If you boys can make pictures move for everyone to see, not just one person, you will change the world." And they did. The Lumières created the cinematograph, a camera, printer, and projector all in one. It was small, elegant, and most importantly, it could show films to an audience. On December 28, 1895, at the Grand Café in Paris, they held the first public film screening in history. 10 short films flickered on the screen: a train arriving, workers leaving a factory, a baby being fed. People gasped, clutched their seats, and some ran out, thinking the train was real and would burst through the wall. That night, cinema opened its eyes. The magic lantern shows faded quietly into nostalgia. No one needed ghosts and glass slides anymore. The Lumières had given the world living light. But if you listen closely, in the hum of a projector or the flicker of a candle, you can still feel the lantern's heartbeat. Every dissolve, every fade, every cinematic trick of light, it all began there. The lanterns may have gone dark, but their glow lingers in every frame of every film ever made. Soft music returns. The gentle hum of an old theater projector. In the next chapter, the narrator whispers, "The world will wake into motion." Edison will challenge the Lumières, and a new question will rise. Who truly made the first movie? A faint hum, the sound of old film reels beginning to spin. Light can travel the world faster than any man. And in the final years of the 19th century, it did. Two men, standing on opposite sides of the ocean, both claimed to have captured that light first. Both said they had made the first movie. But who truly did? Tonight, as the lamps dim and the night deepens, we drift back to that strange, electric twilight of invention, where cinema was born twice. Thomas Alva Edison. His name alone buzzed with invention. The phonograph, the electric light, the telegraph. He was a symbol of progress, a man who turned ideas into machines. And yet, his dream of moving pictures did not begin in his hands, but in the hands of a quiet assistant. His name was William Kennedy Laurie Dixon, a Scottish-born photographer and tinkerer with an artist's patience. In the early 1890s, inside Edison's famous Menlo Park laboratory, Dixon built a camera called the kinetograph. It was heavy, made of brass and wood, and used a new material, celluloid film, a flexible strip coated in light, sensitive chemicals. It could capture images one after another, as the film passed quickly through the camera. When played back, the still images appeared to move. Life preserved in light. Edison, seeing the invention's potential, quickly built a viewing device. The kinetoscope. It looked like a tall cabinet with a small peephole at the top. A single viewer would bend over, peer inside, and watch a short loop of film. A dancer twirling, a man sneezing, a blacksmith at work. For the first time in history, motion had been captured, not drawn, not imagined, but real motion, living light. In 1894, the Black Maria Studio was built in West Orange, New Jersey, the first film studio in the world. It was a small, tar paper, covered building that could rotate to follow the sun. Inside, Edison's team filmed everything from boxing matches to vaudeville performances. The films were short, usually less than a minute, but they mesmerized everyone who saw them. The first audiences lined up to look into the kinetoscope machines at arcades and exhibitions. They paid a nickel each to watch a few seconds of magic. It was a new kind of wonder, private, intimate, and mechanical. Edison believed movies were a solitary experience, like reading a book or listening to a phonograph. He couldn't imagine a world where hundreds would gather to watch together in the dark. But across the ocean, someone else could. In Lyon, France, two brothers worked quietly in a small photographic workshop. Their names were Auguste and Louis Lumière. Unlike Edison, they were not industrial titans. They were craftsmen, thoughtful, precise, and endlessly curious. Their father, Antoine Lumière, was a portrait photographer who encouraged his sons to dream beyond the still image. When Antoine saw Edison's kinetoscope in Paris, he was both amazed and frustrated. The device could show moving pictures, but only to one person at a time. He turned to his sons and said softly, "My boys, you can do better than this." And they did. The Lumières created a camera that could record, develop, and project motion pictures, all in one elegant device. They called it the cinematograph, from the Greek kinema, meaning movement, and graphine, to write. It was lighter than Edison's camera, powered by a hand crank, and could show films on a screen for many to see at once. It wasn't just an invention. It was the birth of the cinematic experience. The Salon Indien of the Grand Café in Paris smelled of coffee and rain. Rows of wooden chairs were set before a white cloth hung on the wall. The audience was small, about 30 people, curious but skeptical. Louis Lumière stood beside his cinematograph, hand on the crank. The room went dark. The machine began to hum softly. And then, the first film flickered to life. Workers leaving the Lumière refectory. Simple, short, and utterly mesmerizing. Men and women walked out through factory gates, laughing and chatting as sunlight glinted off their clothes. It lasted less than a minute, yet in that minute, reality itself changed. Gasps filled the room. One woman whispered, "It's like seeing life caught inside a dream." Then came more short films. The baby's lunch, the sprinkler sprinkled, and finally, arrival of a train at La Ciotat station. As the oncoming locomotive filled the screen, some audience members screamed and ducked, believing it would burst through the wall. Louis Lumière smiled quietly. Cinema had found its first heartbeat. When news of the Lumière public screening reached America, Edison was both impressed and alarmed. He had shown motion pictures before, but never to a public audience through projection. Within a year, he began adapting his kinetoscope films for screen projection. Calling his new invention the Vitascope, he marketed it as Edison's latest marvel. Though much of the work had been done by others, the Lumière idea had crossed the ocean. But now it was a race. Who would define the future of this new art form? Edison saw it as business, patents, ownership, profit. The Lumière saw it as poetry. Life captured in movement, shared among people. The world of cinema, even in its infancy, was already divided between invention and emotion, commerce and art. After that first screening, the Lumière traveled across the world with their cameras. They filmed street markets in Cairo, snow-covered boulevards in Moscow, waves crashing in Nice. For the first time, ordinary people could see faraway places. The beginnings of documentary film. Meanwhile, in America, Edison's team filmed dancers, athletes, and magicians. The first entertainment cinema. In 1896, another filmmaker appeared. Georges Méliès, a magician who attended a Lumière screening and immediately fell in love with the medium. He begged the brothers to sell him a camera. They refused. So Méliès built his own. He discovered that by stopping and restarting the camera, he could make objects vanish, reappear, or transform. He had accidentally invented special effects. His masterpiece, A Trip to the Moon, in 1902, would soon make audiences believe that man had touched the stars, decades before it happened. Cinema was no longer just a record of life. It had become a dream. The Lumière films were gentle, slices of life, light caught in motion. Edison's were industrial, energetic, mechanical, often focused on spectacle. The Lumière gave the world its first documentary. Edison gave it its first studio system. Both were fathers of cinema, though they never worked together, never even met. Their rivalry shaped the soul of every film made after them. The balance between invention and storytelling, between capturing truth and creating illusion. The question still drifts through history like dust in a beam of light. Edison's laboratory captured the first moving pictures on film, but only for one viewer at a time. The Lumière res created the first public screening, the first shared cinema experience. So who made the first movie? The answer depends on what you believe a movie truly is. If it is simply motion captured, then Edison and his assistant Dixon hold the crown. But if a movie is a shared experience of light and story, then the Lumière awakened it. And perhaps, in truth, both were dreamers staring at the same candle flame, seeing the same vision from opposite sides of the ocean. Soft strings fade in, the music of dawn and invention intertwining. In the next chapter, the narrator whispers, "We will follow the flicker as it spreads, from Emily Loss' Moon to Hollywood's birth, and see how light became legend." Soft orchestral hum, like the glow of an old projector warming to life. Before there were movie stars, before theaters filled with laughter and tears, there was only light. And that light, flickering across white walls and curtains, began to dream. It is evening, December 1895. The Grand Café in Paris is dim, filled with murmurs and the faint aroma of roasted coffee. Louis Lumière, calm and unassuming, stands by his cinematograph. The crowd quiets. The film begins. On the wall, a train approaches. At first, just a distant smudge of smoke. Then, a bright beam of light. Then, metal, wheels, power, motion. The locomotive barrels forward. Closer, closer, until it feels as if it will burst through the screen and into the room. The audience gasps. Some cry out, clutching their coats. A few even leap to their feet, stumbling toward the back of the hall. The train never leaves the screen, of course. But in that moment, illusion becomes reality. It is the first time human beings have believed something impossible. Because of moving light. That moment, brief as it was, changed everything. The Lumière brothers' films were only 40 to 60 seconds long, small windows into ordinary life, workers leaving a factory, a baby being fed, a gardener watering flowers, only to be sprayed by his own hose. In El Arrocia Arrose, the first filmed comedy. These films were simple but magical. They captured reality without exaggeration, pure, unfiltered motion. In them, people saw themselves. They laughed, cried, and marveled at the beauty of the everyday. For the Lumières, cinema was not an art form yet. Louis once famously said, "The cinema is an invention without a future." He thought of it as science, not storytelling. But other dreamers saw something else shimmering beneath the surface, a new language waiting to be born. In 1896, a year after the Lumière first screening, a man named Georges M.A. Lies sat among the audience at another Paris showing. He was already a famous magician, owner of the Théâtre Robert Houdin, a place filled with smoke, mirrors, and illusion. When he saw the cinematograph, his heart skipped. To him, this was not science. This was magic incarnate. He rushed to the Lumières, begging them to sell him a camera. They refused, politely but firmly. So Memé, determined, built his own from spare parts and imagination. It was a clumsy contraption, But when he began filming, something miraculous happened. One day, while filming a busy Paris street, his camera jammed for a few seconds. When he restarted it, the people and carriages had shifted slightly. When he played the film back, a horse-drawn carriage appeared to transform into a hearse. Accident had given birth to illusion. Méliès had discovered the jump cut, the foundation of cinematic editing. From Méliès, the camera was not a recorder. It was a paintbrush of time. He began to film stories, short plays filled with tricks, transformations, and impossible scenes. Demons appeared in puffs of smoke. Women vanished into clouds. Heads grew and exploded. He built elaborate sets in glass studios, hand-painted each frame with color, and performed hundreds of on-screen illusions. In 1902, he released his masterpiece, Les Voyages dans la Lune, a trip to the moon. The film begins with a group of astronomers deciding to travel to the moon. They build a giant cannon and fire themselves across the sky in a bullet-shaped capsule. They land on the moon's surface, where stars have faces and the moon itself has eyes. Strange lunar creatures appear, acrobatic and curious. After battles and escapes, the travelers return to Earth. Heroes welcomed with parades and music. It was whimsical, impossible, utterly enchanting, and it changed the way people saw cinema. For the first time, film was not just movement. It was story. Audiences were spellbound. For 15 minutes, they forgot their world and lived inside another. Newspapers called it living fantasy. Children dreamed of moon voyages. Adults whispered about what might come next. Could film capture heaven, the past, dreams themselves? Méliès had unlocked the heart of cinema. Imagination. He was no longer just a magician, he was a storyteller of light. His films were poetic stage plays, bursting with joy and color. Every frame shimmered with hand-painted hues, pink moons, blue stars, golden smoke. He built worlds before world building even existed. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, cinema was taking another path. In America, Edison's studio continued to film snippets of life, boxing matches, dances, and vaudeville acts. But then, other filmmakers began to appear, pioneers like Edwin S. Porter. In 1903, Porter created The Great Train Robbery, a thrilling 12-minute story about bandits, a chase, and justice. He used cross-cutting, switching between scenes of the robbers and the pursuing lawmen, a revolutionary editing technique that gave film a new sense of pace and tension. And then came the iconic ending, a bandit pointing his gun directly at the camera and firing. Audiences screamed and ducked instinctively, just as they had when the Lumière train arrived. Cinema was no longer a novelty. It was a heartbeat pulsing with energy, suspense, and imagination. By the early 1900s, film had spread across continents. In London, filmmakers like R.W. Paul captured city life. In Japan, silent films became known as Benshi cinema, where live narrators told stories alongside the screen. In India, mythological tales were filmed for the first time, blending ancient legends with modern light. Every culture began using cinema to see itself. to preserve memories, dreams, laughter, and loss. For the first time in history, humanity had found a universal language, the language of moving pictures. But dreams can fade, even for dreamers. By 1913, Imailas magic began to lose its charm. Audiences wanted longer, more realistic stories. Studios grew larger, budgets soared. Cinema was becoming an industry. Elias, who had once filmed fantasies in a glass studio, went bankrupt. In his final years, he sold toys at a train station in Paris. While the world he helped create moved on without him. Yet time has a gentle way of remembering its dreamers. Today, his face, painted with moonlight and wonder, lives forever in every frame that dares to imagine something impossible. He gave us the first science fiction film. He gave us the first cinematic universe. He gave us the soul of cinema. By the early 1910s, the world was changing. Film was no longer a curiosity. It was a cultural revolution. New studios emerged in New York, in Paris, in Berlin. But soon, the dream would travel west, to a place where sunlight and sand would birth an empire. A small neighborhood near Los Angeles would soon be filled with cameras, palm trees, and ambition. It would be called Hollywood. Soft orchestral music swells gently, like moonlight on water. In the next chapter, the narrator whispers, "The sleepy dream of cinema will rise beneath the Californian sun, where silent stars will shine and moving pictures will learn to speak." Gentle piano plays, like moonlight spilling onto an empty theater seat. It is 1910. The air smells of orange blossoms and dust. Palm trees sway gently above narrow dirt roads. A small group of filmmakers from New York have arrived in a sleepy village on the edge of Los Angeles. They came searching for light. Warm, reliable sunlight that could turn film reels into gold. They found it here. Within a few years, barns were turned into studios, fields became backlots, and a single wooden sign rose on the hillside, "Hey O the end." No one knew it then, but they had just built the beating heart of a dream. Here under the Californian sun, cinema learned to tell stories on a grand scale. Actors became stars. Directors became visionaries. And audiences around the world fell under the spell of moving light. In these early years, silence ruled the screen. Actors had no voices, yet they spoke volumes. Their expressions, their gestures, their eyes carried entire worlds of emotion. Charlie Chaplin's bowler hat and cane made millions laugh and cry without a single word. Buster Keaton balanced between humor and heartbreak with his stone-faced grace. Greta Garbo's gaze felt like a poem written in shadows. Without sound, cinema became pure visual poetry. Every scene, every cut, every flicker of light had to mean something. Audiences didn't just watch. They felt. It was a universal language that needed no translation, understood from Paris to Karachi, from New York to Tokyo. In 1927, something miraculous and terrifying happened. A film called The Jazz Singer played in theaters. It had music, and more importantly, a voice. When Al Jolson spoke his famous line, wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet," The world gasped. For the first time, the screen talked back. The talkies had arrived. And just like that, everything changed. Silent stars faded into the background, replaced by those who could command sound. Studios raced to rebuild. Cinemas upgraded with speakers. The age of silent dreams was over, and the age of sound had begun. But even in this noisy new world, one truth remained: cinema was still about emotion, light made human. The 1930s and 40s became cinema's golden dawn. Hollywood glittered with endless imagination. There was laughter, some like it hot. There was romance, Gone with the Wind. There was courage, Casablanca. And there was wonder, The Wizard of Oz. Black and white slowly bloomed into color. Cameras grew lighter. Editing became art. Music became emotion. The screen turned into a mirror for humanity, reflecting every joy, fear, dream, and heartbreak we carried inside. The world went to the movies to escape, but also to remember itself. Soon, cinema no longer belonged to one nation. Italy gave us neorealism, poetic slices of post-war life. Japan offered Kurosawa's samurai dreams, discipline and destiny wrapped in rain. India birthed Bollywood, where songs carried hearts higher than words. France whispered with Nouvelle Vague, and Britain captured kitchen sink realism. Every culture painted its own reflection on the same luminous canvas. Cinema became a global lullaby, sung in every language, glowing in every shade of human feeling. As decades passed, technology evolved. Film learned to fly, to create worlds that never existed. In the 1970s, filmmakers like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg turned imagination into spectacle. Spaceships soared, sharks hunted, dreams roared in Dolby stereo. The 1980s brought computer graphics, light bending itself into fantasy. And by the 1990s, digital cinema was being born. Film no longer needed reels or chemicals. Light became code, pure, infinite, timeless. Cinema, once a trembling train on a white wall, could now show us galaxies, memories, and impossible futures. Now, after all our drifting through time, after all the reels and dreams and flickering ghosts, we return to the question whispered at the beginning: who made the first movie? Some credit Thomas Edison, whose labs birthed the kinetoscope. Some say the Lumière brothers, whose arrival of a train electrified the world. Others name Georges Méliès, who gave cinema its first heart and soul. But perhaps the truth is softer than that. Perhaps the first movie wasn't made by hands or machines. Perhaps it was born the moment a human stared into firelight and saw shadows dance. Because long before cameras, we were already filmmakers, dreamers who turned darkness into light, silence into meaning, and moments into stories. Cinema, after all, is simply our oldest dream, finally made visible. Now the theater is dark again. The reel spins down. A soft hum fills the room. You, the last dreamer awake, sit beneath the faint glow of the screen, watching it fade to white. And in that silence, something beautiful lingers. Every movie you've ever loved, every laugh, every tear, every heartbeat, is part of the same ancient flame that once danced on cave walls. From the Lumière to misty, from Chaplin to Kubrick, from black and white to digital stars. Cinema remains what it always was, a flicker of human light, refusing to sleep. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts drift between frames, remember, the movies never truly end. They only fade gently into dreams. Soft orchestral theme swells. A final lullaby made of light. Good night, dreamer. The story of cinema continues. Each time someone closes their eyes and imagines. Soft ambient music rises. A piano made of starlight. Slow and weightless. The theater is empty now. Only dust and echoes remain. But in that quiet darkness, something stirs, a glimmer upon the lens. Cinema, though resting, is never truly asleep. It dreams. And in those dreams, time bends once more. Imagine light no longer trapped in celluloid reels, but traveling as invisible signals. Through the air, rays that leap from satellites, drift through clouds, and arrive glowing in the palms of our hands. The dream once whispered in dark rooms is now everywhere. In every pocket, on every screen, the whole planet has become a theater. Streaming platforms hum softly through the night, their endless libraries of stories whispering to sleepless souls. Each click is a candle, each film a small constellation. Some nights, billions of people press play. At the same time, and for a brief moment, humanity shares a single heartbeat, united by light. But even now, beneath the algorithms and cables, the same ancient rhythm remains shadow, light, wonder. Cinema hasn't vanished, it has multiplied, scattered like stardust. And in the glow of tablets and projectors, the dream continues to breathe. Once, filmmakers captured only what the eye could see. Now, they paint what the mind imagines. From the pencil sketches of Walt Disney's Steamboat Willie to the digital symphonies of Pixar and Studio Ghibli, animation became the purest form of cinematic dreaming. A mouse whistled on a river. A lion roared beneath the sun. A boy and a dragon soared through clouds of watercolor memory. These weren't actors or sets, they were feelings. Drawn frame by hands that believed imagination could be real. Children grew up with these moving paintings, and even adults found themselves crying before drawn eyes that seemed to understand their hearts. Animation proved that cinema didn't need cameras at all, only a pulse of creativity and a belief that stillness could move. Somewhere, in climate-controlled vaults beneath the ground, old film reels sleep, their edges curled, their colors fading to sepia dreams. Archivists and restorers move carefully through the dark, their gloved hands brushing dust from forgotten frames. When they place the reels upon the projector, ghosts awaken. The laughter of Chaplin, the spark of M.A. Lace, the shimmer of forgotten actresses all return for a few flickering minutes. It is resurrection through light. Every recovered film is a heartbeat restored, a reminder that even the most fragile dream can outlive its dreamer. Sometimes, when the archivists finish their work, they switch off the lights and stay for a while, just watching the glow fade on the wall, as if saying good night to the past. In an age filled with noise, beeps, shouts, notifications, some filmmakers returned to silence. Modern directors began crafting films without dialogue, letting faces, gestures, and music speak instead. They said silence was the truest language of the screen, and in that hush, audiences felt something deeper, a quiet heartbeat of humanity that words could never reach. It was the echo of the old days of Chaplin, Garbo, and the Lumière res alive again. Sometimes progress brings us back home. On rooftops in Lagos, children watch movies projected onto white sheets. In tiny towns in Pakistan, villagers gather under stars, their faces glowing blue from the single bulb of a mobile projector. In Tokyo apartments, lonely souls stream silent black, and white classics late at night, finding peace in flicker and shadow. Cinema no longer needs theaters. The world itself has become the screen. Stories drift across oceans like messages in bottles. A filmmaker in Brazil makes a short that moves a poet in Cairo. An animator in Manila inspires a musician in Oslo. Light travels faster than borders, and in that speed, the planet dreams together. Now, in laboratories filled with quiet hums, machines are beginning to imagine too. Artificial intelligence, programs made of code and logic, have begun to write scripts, paint frames, compose music, even edit films. Some fear this, others marvel. But perhaps, like Meme lies with his jump, cut accident, we are witnessing another happy mistake, a new kind of magic that will teach us once more what it means to be human. Because no matter how clever a machine becomes, it cannot feel a story. It can predict patterns, but it cannot ache. It cannot sit in a dark theater and whisper, "That's me." The heart of cinema still beats in us, in the trembling of hands holding popcorn, in the hush before the lights dim, in the tears we hide as credits roll. Every night, somewhere in the world, a child watches their first movie. Maybe it's black and white, maybe animated, maybe filmed on a phone, but in that instant, the child's eyes widen. They feel the same wonder that once shook the Grand Café in 1895. That child will grow up to tell stories of their own, on screens, on walls, on whatever new canvas the future allows. Cinema survives not in film or pixels, but in the heartbeat that leaps when the light begins. And so the lineage continues, an unbroken chain of dreamers, passing the flame. Close your eyes now. Imagine a screen stretching endlessly across the universe. On it play every story ever told, from the first flicker of a torchlight in a cave to the digital symphonies of tomorrow. The stars themselves are tiny projectors, casting scenes of cosmic creation across the velvet night. Somewhere out there, another civilization might be watching its own version of the arrival of a train, gasping as light moves for the first time. The dream repeats forever. Cinema, after all, is not confined to Earth. It is the instinct of consciousness to record, to remember, to imagine, and perhaps, one day, when we travel beyond our planet, we'll carry with us our films, our luminous memories, to show the stars what it means to be human. The projection light fades again. The world is quiet. But listen closely somewhere. Another story is beginning. A camera blinks open like an eye at dawn. A beam of light slices through dust. The reel hums softly. Once again, the universe breathes in and exhales another dream. There is no first movie. The narrator murmurs. There is only the first dream, and it keeps dreaming still. And with that, the screen goes dark. You, the listener, drift deeper into the night, carrying 1,000 tiny lights within your chest, each one a story, each one alive. Soft strings fade. The sound of an old film reel spinning into infinity. When we remember cinema's birth, we speak of Edison, the Lumière, and E.A. Liss, names carved into the marble of history. But history, like light, has its blind spots. Behind the bright figures of fame, there are softer silhouettes. Dreamers who worked in the margins, often unseen, yet who helped the light move and the stories breathe. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them whisper through the hum of forgotten film reels. This is their story, the story of the dreamers history forgot. A scene to Alice Guy, the first storyteller. It begins in France, in 1896. Just 1 year after the Lumière brothers screened their first films. In a small office of the Gaumont Company, a young secretary named Alice Guy watched a demonstration of the new motion picture camera. The others saw a machine for science. She saw a machine for stories. With courage that defied her time, she asked her boss if she could make a short film. Not of factory workers or streets, but of imagination. He said yes. So Alice wrote, directed, and produced La Fée aux Choux, The Cabbage Fairy, a tiny tale about babies being born in a garden of cabbages. It sounds whimsical, but it was revolutionary. That day, Alice Guy became the world's first narrative filmmaker. She would go on to direct hundreds of films. Comedies, dramas, fantasies. Long before Hollywood existed, she experimented with color tinting, synchronized sound, and multi-layered storytelling decades ahead of her peers. And yet, when the history books were written, her name faded into the margins. It would take a century for her light to be rediscovered, for historians to whisper her name again, reverently, like a secret finally remembered. Scene 3, The Silent Women of Early Film. Alice Guy was not alone. Across the world, women stepped into the light before the industry turned its gaze away. In America, Lois Weber made films that challenged morality and politics, often addressing issues like poverty, birth control, and class division. At a time when such topics were forbidden, she was one of the highest paid directors of her era. In Britain, Mabel Normand, one of the first great comedians, taught Charlie Chaplin his timing. In Italy, Elvira Notari filmed the streets of Naples, capturing the raw pulse of working class life. But as studios grew richer and power became centralized, the silent women of cinema were gently pushed out, their names erased from the credits, their reels lost to time. The celluloid decayed, the studios closed, and the voices of these early pioneers sank beneath the noise of history. Scene 4, The Lost Reels of the World. There are thousands of films that no one has ever seen. Silent masterpieces buried in basements, eaten by fire, or melted in the heat of forgotten archives. Film, you see, is mortal. It breathes, it burns. Its memory can vanish with a spark or a careless hand. Scholars estimate that over 70% of silent films are lost forever. Gone are the works of pioneers from India, Egypt, Iran, China, Russia. Whole chapters of the human dream missing, like torn pages from an ancient book. Sometimes, though, a reel reappears. A farmer finds a rusted canister in a barn. A projectionist discovers an unmarked film behind a wall. A forgotten reel from Argentina turns out to contain a lost lice. And when light passes through that fragile ribbon again, when faces from a century ago flicker back to life, it feels as if time itself takes a breath. Cinema, after all, is memory resurrected. Scene 5: The Dreamers in Shadows. Not all pioneers held cameras. Some invented the ways we see. Edward Muybridge, who captured motion through sequential photographs. Etienne, Jules Mary, who shaped time into frames. William Kennedy Laurie Dixon, Edison's engineer, who built the first film strip. These inventors were dreamers of mechanics, turning vision into rhythm. Yet many of their assistants, technicians, chemists, women colorists who tinted every frame, remain unnamed. In the early 1900s, entire workshops of women painted film, by hand, one frame at a time, turning black and white dreams into living color. They bent over tables for hours, their brushes dipped in dyes of blue, rose, and gold. When audiences gasped at the glowing hues on screen, they never knew the hands that made them shimmer. Their art dissolved into anonymity, but the colors they created still dance in our films today. Scene 6: The Forgotten Studios. Before Hollywood ruled the world, there were other Edens of cinema. In Bombay, Calcutta, and Lahore, silent filmmakers blended local myths with Western technique, birthing the first Indian film movements. In Cairo, a woman named Aziza Amir produced and starred in Layla, 1927, the first full-length Egyptian film, becoming the mother of Arab cinema. In Shanghai, studios created poetic epics about love, revolution, and modernity, their stories shimmering through the mist of the Wangpu River. And in Nigeria, traveling performers turned oral folklore into visual tales projected on cloth screens beneath the stars. These films may not have reached Western theaters, but they built bridges of emotion that would one day connect the entire world. Every culture saw the same miracle, a flicker of light that could carry a soul. Say Scene 7, The Tragedy of Time. Every art form faces loss, but film's fragility is especially cruel. Early nitrate film stock was as delicate as memory, and just as flammable. One spark, and decades of dreams vanished in smoke. Entire archives burned in New Jersey, Paris, and Moscow. In 1937, a fire at Fox destroyed 75% of their silent films. Later, floods, mold, and neglect erased more history still. The saddest part, sometimes, no one even noticed. A movie lost is not just a reel. It is an entire heartbeat gone, a moment that can never be seen again. When archivists talk about these lost films, their voices lower, as if mourning ghosts. Because that's what film really is. Light made of memory. And when it dies, the past darkens a little more. Scene 8, the rediscovery yet. Not all is lost. In recent years, old reels have been found buried in permafrost in the Yukon, hidden in church basements, tucked in forgotten European attics. Each rediscovery is like hearing a long, lost melody again. When The Passion of Joan of Arc was rediscovered in 1981, thought lost for half a century, audiences wept at the raw emotion that had survived time itself. And when fragments of early Asian and African films reappeared, historians realized how incomplete our story of cinema truly was. Every rediscovered frame rewrites the past, proving that no dream is ever fully gone, only waiting for the light to find it again. Scene 9, the whisper of the forgotten. Imagine now, a quiet theater in eternity. Rows of empty seats. On the screen, faces flicker, faces of those whose names the world forgot. Alice Guy smiles, directing her actors under a painted sky. Lois Weber adjusts a light. Elvira Notari sets her frame. A nameless hand colors the film with a tiny brush. They are all here, their light eternal, their silence speaking louder than applause. Cinema remembers them not with fame, but with feeling. Every story told since then, every frame, every tear, every dream, carries a trace of their touch. Scene 10, the light that never dies. So, who made the first movie? Perhaps none of the names we know, and all of those we don't. Cinema was not born from one hand, but from 1,000 unseen hearts beating toward the same miracle, to make life move, to make light breathe. The forgotten dreamers gave us this gift, a gift that continues to glow, quietly, endlessly, across every screen in the world. When we sit in the dark and watch a film, we are not alone. The ghosts of all those who dreamed before us sit beside us, smiling softly in the flicker. The music fades to a single note, gentle, endless, like a star that refuses to fade. Light remembers, the narrator whispers. Even when we forget. S fade to silence,